I want to start today with something that, honestly, when I first read it, it gave me goosebumps.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't mean the fun kind. I mean the spooky, wait, what? Kind of goosebumps. The real glitch in the Matrix feeling.
Okay, that's a strong start. I'm listening. What have you got?
Okay, so picture this. It's 1962.
Right.
JFK is in the White House. The Beatles haven't really invaded America yet. We are living in a world of, rotary phones, 3 television channels if you're lucky, and libraries that use those little wooden card catalogs.
You with me?
I am absolutely with you. A completely analog world. No clicks, no swipes.
None of that.
Yeah.
So in the middle of this very analog world, a man writes down a prediction. He's describing a future technology.
Okay.
And he says this technology will, and I'm quoting here, include television as its content, that it will obsolesce mass library organization, and this is a specific phrase that just freaked me out.
Mm-hmm.
It will flip into a private line to speedily tailored data of a saleable kind.
Speedily tailored data of a saleable kind. Yes. In 1962, he basically predicted the targeted Instagram ad, the algorithmic TikTok feed, the death of the encyclopedia, all of it, almost 30 years before the World Wide Web even existed.
That is Herbert Marshall McLuhan for you. It's unnerving, isn't it? When you read that quote, it doesn't feel like a guess.
No.
It feels like he saw a blueprint.
Mm-hmm.
Like he was reading the user manual for a machine that hadn't been built yet.
It really, really does. And that's who we're talking about today, Marshall McLuhan. Now, I know the name. I think most people, they've heard the name. He's the medium is the message guy. He's the global village guy.
He is the patron saint of Wired magazine, for sure. And also probably the most misunderstood intellectual of the 20th century.
Well, that's exactly what I want to get into, because I'll be honest, I've used the phrase global village 100 times.
Everyone asks.
And I usually use it to mean, hey, isn't it cool that I can FaceTime my friend in Tokyo? It sounds cozy. It sounds nice.
And that is exactly where most people get it wrong. Profoundly wrong. McLuhan did not mean it was cozy, but we'll definitely get to that.
Right. So the mission for this deep dive is to go past the bumper stickers. I really want to understand how this guy, who was writing before the internet, before smartphones, before AI, how he somehow managed to figure out exactly how these things would mess with our heads.
And mess with our heads is, I think, exactly the right way to put it. We aren't just looking at McLuhan the historian, we're looking at McLuhan the detective.
Yeah.
Or maybe the mechanic.
The mechanic, I like that.
Yeah, mechanic of the mind.
Yeah.
Because his whole argument, and we're going to spend a lot of time on this, is that technology doesn't just help us do things. It's not just a tool. It changes who we are.
It rewires us.
It fundamentally rewires us. You had this term, the sensorium.
A sensorium. I saw that word in the notes. It sounds like a part of a spaceship.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it's actually pretty simple. It just refers to the balance of our senses. Your sight, your hearing, touch, taste, smell. McLuhan believed that every major technology in history turns the volume knob up on some senses and turns it way down on others.
Okay, so like a mixing board for our senses.
A mixing board for the soul, almost. And when you change that balance, that mix, you change how a human being thinks, how they feel, and ultimately how they act in the world.
So just to make this concrete, if I'm spending my day staring at a screen versus, say, listening to the radio or reading a book, I'm actually a different biological entity in some fundamental way.
Effectively, yes. Your cognitive patterns are different. The neural pathways you're using are different. And if you change enough individuals in the same way, you change the entire civilization.
Okay, that is huge. That is a massive claim. We absolutely have to unpack that. But before we get into the heavy theory, I really need to understand who this guy was. Because in my head, a media philosopher from the 60s should be this, cool, chain-smoking New Yorker hanging out with Andy Warhol.
He did eventually hang out with that crowd. You're not wrong about that.
Yeah.
But he definitely didn't start there. His origins are actually much more, rustic.
Yeah, I was really surprised to see he was Canadian. Not what I expected.
Born in Edmonton, Alberta in 1911, raised in Winnipeg, Manitoba. This is the prairies. We're talking harsh winters, vast open spaces. It's not exactly the center of the media universe.
Not at all. And he wasn't even studying media at first, was he? He started out in engineering.
He did. He enrolled at the University of Manitoba as an engineering student.
See, that's such a weird pivot to me. How do you go from building bridges to analyzing poetry? It feels like 2 totally different brains.
Well, he only lasted a year in engineering before he switched to English literature. But I honestly don't think he ever really lost that engineering mindset. It became his secret weapon.
How so? What do you mean by that?
Think about what an engineer does. They look at a structure, a bridge, an engine, a circuit board, and they ask, how does this work? What are the principles? How does the stress flow? What are the mechanics?
Right, they're looking at the system, not the paint job.
Precisely. And McLuhan applied that same lens to art and communication.
Yeah.
He didn't just want to know what a poem meant. He wanted to know how it was built, what its structural effect was on the person reading it.
So he was reverse engineering literature.
Exactly. And that whole approach got supercharged when he went to England. He headed to Cambridge in 1934 to do his PhD.
Okay.
And this is actually a bit of a funny story. He already had a master's degree from the University of Manitoba. He's, a very smart guy. But Cambridge being Cambridge.
Let me guess. They looked down their noses at the colonial degree.
Oh, completely.
Huh.
They basically said, that's nice, dear. Now, if you want to study here, you'll have to enroll as an undergraduate again and do the whole thing over.
That's brutal. Imagine having a master's degree and having to sit in a lecture hall with a bunch of 18-year-old freshmen. I would have been furious.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But McLuhan actually spun it. He later said something like, the advantage of being a Westerner is that we're under no illusion that we've had an education. He was totally willing to start from the bottom.
That's a great attitude.
And it's a good thing he did, because he met two teachers there who basically changed the entire trajectory of his life. I.A. Richards and F.R. Leavis.
These are the new criticism guys, right? I remember hearing that term in a college lit class, but I think I might have fallen asleep. What actually is new criticism?
So, without getting too bogged down in academic jargon, the old way of reading a book was to look at the biography of the author, or the history of the time period, and try to guess what the author was feeling or intending.
Right, like Dickens must have been sad about poverty when he wrote this.
Exactly. New criticism came along and said, forget the author. The author is dead. Look at the text itself. Look at the machine of the words on the page.
Okay, so don't worry if Shakespeare is having a bad day. Just look at how the sonnet is constructed, the form.
Right. And specifically, look at the effect that form has on the reader. I.A. Richards, one of his teachers, had this concept he called feed forward.
Feed forward. I know feedback. What's feed forward?
So feedback is when you do something and you get a signal back that tells you how it went. Feed forward is the mechanism of anticipation. It's how a complex system like a poem or an advertisement or a human brain prepares itself for what's coming next. It creates the conditions for its own reception.
Can you give me a real-world example of that?
Sure. Think about a joke. The setup of a joke is pure feed forward.
Okay.
It primes your brain. It sets up an expectation, a pattern, specifically so that the punchline can break that pattern in a surprising way. If the setup doesn't work, if that feed-forward mechanism fails, the punchline just falls flat.
Right, you don't laugh.
You don't laugh. And Richards taught McLuhan to look for that feed-forward mechanism everywhere. How does communication set the stage for its own effect?
I see. So McLuhan starts looking at everything this way, not just poems.
Exactly. He has this huge light bulb moment where he realizes you can analyze a newspaper, a radio broadcast, or a television set the same way you analyze a sonnet. You don't ask, is the news on this channel true? You ask, how does the structure of a 24-hour news channel change the way I perceive the world?
That's the engineer coming back out again. He's looking at the wiring.
He's always looking at the wiring, but there's one more piece of the puzzle for McLuhan's personality that we absolutely can't ignore.
Yeah.
And it's the spiritual piece.
Right. The notes mention he converted to Catholicism. Was this just a social thing, or was he really deep into it?
Oh, he was deep, deeply devout. And it wasn't how he was raised at all. I think his family was Baptist, but he became an agnostic in university. He was sort of drifting. But then he discovered the writer G.K. Chesterton.
The guy who wrote the Father Brown Mysteries?
The very same.
Yeah.
Chesterton was a master of paradox, a brilliant writer, and a very public Catholic intellectual. And McLuhan read him and was just hooked. There's a letter McLuhan wrote to his mother in 1935 that is it's heartbreakingly honest. He wrote, "Had I not encountered Chesterton, I would have remained agnostic. Chesterton did not convince me of religious faith, but he prevented my despair from becoming a habit."
Wow. Prevented my despair from becoming a habit.
That's heavy. That sounds like someone who is staring into the void.
I think he really was. You have to remember the time. This is the mid-1930s. The world is sliding towards World War II. Ideologies are clashing. He was a highly sensitive, highly intellectual young man, seeing a world that was becoming increasingly chaotic and meaningless. He needed an anchor.
And he found it in the church.
He officially joined the Catholic Church in 1937, and while he was actually very private about his faith, he didn't want to be pigeonholed as a Catholic thinker, it informed absolutely everything he did. It gave him what he called a super-historical perspective.
What does that mean, a super-historical perspective? It means he felt he had a place to stand outside of history. If you're just a secular historian, you're kind of trapped in your own time. You look at the 1950s and think that's normal.
Right, it's a baseline.
But if you're grounded in this 2,000-year-old tradition, you could look at the 20th century and say, whoa, this is weird. This is a blip. This isn't normal at all. It gave him a stable point from which to judge the chaos of modern media.
It's like having a satellite view of the planet instead of just a street view of your own neighborhood.
That's a fantastic analogy. In fact, he didn't say this in his books, but he privately compared satellite technology to the Star of Bethlehem.
No way.
Yes. He saw these deep connections between the technological and the spiritual that almost nobody else was even looking for.
Okay, so this is our guy. He's got the brain of an engineer, the training of a literary critic, and the soul of a Catholic mystic.
What a combination.
It's an incredible combination. And he takes this unique toolkit and he moves to the University of Toronto. And then in 1964, he drops the bomb, Understanding Media.
The book that changed everything and launched 1,000 arguments.
And the phrase that everyone knows, even if they don't know who said it, the medium is the message.
Yes, the big one.
Okay, stop. We need to really wrestle with this. Because every single time I hear this, I feel like it's a riddle that's designed to annoy me.
It is a bit of a riddle. It's a probe.
The medium is the message. If I watch a documentary about the Civil War on TV, the message is the Civil War. It's the facts, the history, the stories. But McLuhan seems to be saying, no, the message is the TV screen itself. And I'm like, what? The screen didn't fight the Battle of Gettysburg?
That is the common reaction.
Yeah.
It's the logical reaction.
Yeah.
And it's why a lot of people dismissed him as a charlatan. But let's look at his specific definition of message. For McLuhan, the message isn't the content. It isn't what is being said.
Okay.
The message is the change of scale, pace, or pattern that a new innovation introduces into human affairs.
Okay, that's still very abstract. Give me the light bulb. I know that's his famous example.
It's the perfect clarifying example. Think about a light bulb. Does it have any content?
No, it's just a light. It doesn't tell a story. It doesn't have a plot or characters. It's just on.
Right. Unless you're using it to spell out words on a marquee, a light bulb is pure medium without any content. But now think about what the light bulb did to human life.
Well, it let us stay up late.
It did more than that. Before electric light, construction on a building stopped at sundown. Reading stopped at sundown. Most social life was dictated entirely by the rising and setting of the sun.
Right. You went to bed when it got dark.
The electric light bulb completely restructured human time and space. It allowed us to turn night into day. It enabled the 24-hour factory shift, which created modern industry. It allowed for cars to drive safely at 2 a.m. It literally created the 24/7 society.
So the message of the light bulb isn't here is light. The message is the sun is no longer your boss.
Yes, exactly. The message is the total restructuring of human life. Now, whether you are using that light to read the Bible or to read a comic book, that is the content. And McLuhan's radical claim is that the content is almost totally irrelevant to the deep structural change. The light bulb changed society the same way, regardless of what you were doing under its glow.
Okay, that makes perfect sense with the light bulb because it has no content. But let's apply it to TV because TV does have content. It has The Sopranos or Sesame Street. Surely it matters if I'm watching brilliant educational programming versus, reality trash.
To your personal education on a specific topic, yes, of course it matters. But to your sensorium, to the deep structures of society, McLuhan would say no, it doesn't matter at all. He has this amazing quote. He says, the content is just the juicy piece of meat carried by the burglar to distract the watchdog of the mind.
I love that quote so much. We're the watchdog.
Your conscious, critical thinking is the watchdog. You're sitting there analyzing the plot of the show. You're thinking, is this character arc realistic? Do I agree with the politics of this news anchor? You're chewing on the meat.
Right.
And meanwhile, the burglar, the medium of television itself, is quietly breaking into your house and rearranging all the furniture.
And what is the furniture in this analogy? My brain.
Your attention span, your relationship to time, your need for constant visual stimulation, the very fact that you're sitting passive, immobile for hours, receiving a constant stream of images, that physical and mental posture is changing you, regardless of whether the images are of saints or sinners.
So while I'm busy debating the political bias of a news anchor, the TV medium itself is training me to be passive and to expect problems to be resolved in 22 minutes plus commercials.
Exactly. And if we pull that forward to the smartphone today.
Oh, God, let's do it. It's too perfect.
We spend all our time arguing about the content on social media. Is this post-misinformation? Is this person being a bully? Is this hate
Right.
speech? Those are the content arguments. They're the stake.
Okay.
McLuhan would tell us, look at the form, look at the device, look at the infinite scroll.
The fact that it never, ever ends.
The message of the smartphone isn't the tweet you just read. The message is that you are now available to everyone, 24/7. The message is that your attention is now fragmented into 15-second chunks. The message is that you are never, ever truly alone or bored.
That's terrifying because we're all running around trying to flex the content, let's have better content moderation, but nobody is talking about banning the infinite scroll itself.
Because the medium is invisible to us. We swim in it like fish swim in water. You can't ask a fish to describe water. McLuhan was the guy trying to pull us out of the fishbowl for a minute and say, hey, look at the water. The water's making you grow gills.
Okay, I'm sold. I get it now. I really get it. The medium is the environment that changes us. But McLuhan didn't stop there. He started categorizing these media, and this is where I think he loses people again. The whole hot and cool media thing.
Ah, yes. The famously confusing terminology.
It's super confusing because in 2024, hot means sexy or trending or popular, and cool means, well, it means cool. But McLuhan says radio is hot and TV is cool. That just feels completely backwards to my modern ears.
You have to totally reset your vocabulary. He's not using those words the way we do. He's borrowing from jazz slang of the 40s and 50s.
Yeah, slang.
Yeah. In the jazz world back then, if a solo was hot, it was intense, loud, fast, in your face. It left nothing to the imagination. But if a musician was cool, they were detached, laid back, minimalist. They invited you in to fill the spaces they left.
Okay, so hot is aggressive and cool is laid back. Let's define them technically. What makes a medium hot?
A hot medium is high definition, and by that he means it is packed with data, it's full of information, it gives you everything you need.
High definition. So like a high-resolution photograph.
A photograph is the perfect example of a hot medium. It shows you the wrinkles, the colors, the specific lighting. Your eye doesn't have to do any work to figure out what it's looking at. The information is spoon-fed to you.
So radio is hot because the audio fills your ear.
Exactly. He argued it's a single-sense hearing that is filled to the brim with information. You just sit back and receive the download. The key thing about hot media is they require low participation from the audience.
Low participation. I don't have to fill in the blanks.
Exactly. Now flip it. A cool medium is low definition. It gives you very little information. It's sketchy. It's impressionistic.
And his primary example is TV. But wait a second. TV gives me pictures and sound. Isn't that way more information than radio, which is just sound?
This is the crucial point. This is where you have to remember he's watching television in 1960.
Right. Rabbit ears. A tiny, blurry, black and white screen with a snowy picture.
Exactly. The image was terrible. It was a mesh of scanning dots, a low-resolution mosaic. McLuhan argued that to watch that kind of television, your brain had to constantly, subconsciously, work to connect the dots just to form a coherent picture. You were participating. You were leaning in to complete the image.
So cool literally means I have to do some of the work.
Yes, the user has to be active to create meaning. The telephone is another classic cool medium.
Because you can't see the person's face.
Right. You have to imagine their expression. You have to listen carefully to the tone of their voice to guess if they're smiling or frowning. You are actively filling in all the missing data. That is high participation. A cartoon is cool for the same reason. It's just a few lines, and your brain fills in the rest.
Okay, so let me try a pop quiz. A podcast. This thing we're doing right now, is a podcast hot or cool?
Ooh, that is a good question. By his original logic, radio is hot, so you'd think a podcast would be hot. But podcasts are often so conversational, right? They're rambling, they're intimate.
And I'm probably not sitting in rapt attention. I'm listening while I do the dishes or go for a run.
I'd argue a scripted audiobook read by a professional actor is hot. It's a complete performance being delivered to you. But a rambling chat show like this one, it might be cooler.
Yeah.
You feel like you're hanging out. You're interpreting the silence, the laughter. It's more participatory.
What about something like TikTok?
Extremely cool. Not in the slang sense, but in the McLuhan sense. The videos are short, often chaotic. They require you to know all the pre-existing memes and inside jokes and sounds to understand what's even happening.
Right, if you show a TikTok to your grandma, she doesn't get it.
She doesn't get it. Why? Because she can't fill in the blanks. She doesn't have the context. She can't participate in the meaning-making. So for her, it's just noise. For a teenager, it's a rich, cool, highly participatory medium.
So why does this distinction even matter? Who cares if a medium is hot or cool? What's the point?
Because McLuhan believed they create fundamentally different types of societies,
Yeah.
different types of people. He argued that hot media like print, which is very dense, linear, and visual, creates people who are logical, individualistic, specialized, and emotionally detached. Think left-brain people.
The classic intellectual, the accountant reading a spreadsheet in their office.
Exactly. But cool media like television, or the telephone, he thought they create people who are more involved, tribal, holistic, and emotional, right-brain people. He believed the massive societal shift from a print-dominated culture to a TV-dominated culture was literally shifting us from being a society of logical individuals to being one giant emotional soup.
And that emotional soup, that brings us to the global village.
Yes, this is part 4, the great epic shift from what he called the Gutenberg galaxy to the global village.
Okay, before the village, can we talk about Typographic Man? Because that sounds like a truly terrible superhero.
Able to alphabetize a phone book at the speed of light. No, Typographic Man is us, or at least who we used to be for about 500 years.
What does that mean?
McLuhan argues that the invention of the printing press in the 15th century didn't just give us more books. It rewired the Western brain to think in straight lines.
Because lines of text on a page are straight.
Left to right, top to bottom, one word after another, in a fixed sequence, cause and effect. Introduction, body, conclusion. McLuhan says that living inside that environment for 5 centuries made us intensely visual, linear, and rational. It also, he argued, made us lonely.
Lonely. How does a book make you lonely?
Because reading is a silent, private act. You do it alone, in your own head. It separated us from the group. It literally invented the modern concept of the individual. Before print, in an oral tribal culture, nobody was an individual with a private point of view. You were just part of the tribe. Print allowed you to have a private mind.
Okay, so that's the Gutenberg galaxy. It's orderly, it's rational, it's private. And then comes the electric wire, the telegraph, the radio, the internet.
And suddenly the walls of that private mind are just blown out. Information isn't linear anymore. It's not sequential. It's simultaneous. It's coming at you from everywhere all at once.
And this is the global village.
This is the global village.
Yeah.
But I want you to notice the word he chose. He didn't say global city or global library. He said global village. Have you ever lived in a really small village?
I grew up in a suburb, which is bad enough. Everyone knows when you get a new package from Amazon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now multiply that by 1,000. In a real pre-literate village, there is zero privacy. If you have a fight with your spouse, the entire village hears it. If you sneeze, the village blesses you. It is a place of total, absolute interdependence.
And total surveillance. Everyone is in everyone else's business.
All the time. And this is the quote you have to remember. McLuhan wrote, "Terror is the normal state of any oral society, for in it, everything affects everything all the time."
Terror is the normal state.
Yeah.
That is not cozy.
Think about Twitter, or X, or whatever we're calling it.
Oh, God, yeah.
Is it a calm, rational place where we exchange linear, well-reasoned arguments?
No, it's a mob. It's a constant riot.
It's a tribal drum. It's acoustic space. Someone beats the drum. Look at this person who said a bad thing. And the entire village instantly rushes to the public square to scream and throw things. It is pure, instantaneous emotion. The rational individual doesn't stand a chance in that environment.
That makes so much sense. We think we're using these new tools to express our unique selves, but really we're just rejoining the tribe. We're giving up our hard-won privacy to be part of the group mind again.
And McLuhan saw this coming in the 1960s. He saw that the electronic age would re-tribalize humanity. He said, in the electric age, Big Brother goes inside. We don't need a dictator with cameras watching us anymore. We watch each other. We internalize the surveillance.
That's so dark. But, you know, when you read him, he didn't seem to hate it. Or love it, for that matter. He just observed it, like a scientist looking at ants.
That was his absolute stance. He refused to be a moralist. He had this great line, "To raise a moral complaint about this is like cussing a buzzsaw for lopping off fingers."
Laughs.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a fair point. If you stick your hand in a buzzsaw, don't blame the saw for being a saw.
Exactly. The saw does what a saw does. If you understand the mechanism of the saw, you can use it safely and keep your fingers. If you just stand there yelling, "Saws are evil," you're going to get hurt. McLuhan's goal was awareness of the mechanism, so we wouldn't be victims of it.
He wanted us to wake up and see the water in the fishbowl.
Yes. He famously said, "I wouldn't be seen dead with a living work of art." Meaning, he didn't want to just live inside the environment and enjoy it. He wanted to stand outside and probe it. He was a provocateur.
Speaking of being a provocateur, the guy was a bit of a pop culture celebrity, wasn't he? He wasn't just hiding in the library stacks.
Oh, he absolutely loved the spotlight. He was on television constantly. He wrote for popular magazines. He was analyzing advertising way before it was cool.
Right, The Mechanical Bride. That was his first book from 1951.
Yes. He would take these glossy magazine ads for cars and stockings and deodorant and analyze them with the same seriousness that a critic would analyze a Shakespeare play. He saw that ads were the real folk art of the 20th century because they were designed to manipulate the collective subconscious.
And then there's the famous typo. I love this story. His big visually experimental book, The Medium is the Massage.
Massage.
It was supposed to be Message, wasn't it? The original title.
It was. The typesetter at the printer made a mistake. The proof came back from the printer, and it said, "The medium is the massage." And his co-author was probably horrified, but instead of fixing it, McLuhan shouted, "Leave it alone, it's great, it's right on target."
Why? Was he just being lazy or contrary?
No. He instantly saw the four-level pun. It was a happy accident.
Okay, what are the 4 levels?
Well, you have message, the original idea, but you also have mass age, as in the age of the masses, and message, as in our messy, chaotic era. And finally, massage.
Massage, like
Right.
literally rubbing someone.
Yes, because the medium works us over. It needs our brains. It physically massages our sensorium, changing our sensory balance. He thought it was the most perfect accident.
That book is wild, by the way. If you haven't seen it, listeners, you have to Google the images. It's not just text. It's weird photos, text that runs upside down and backwards. It looks like a punk rock zine from the 90s, but it's from 1967.
It was a cool book. He made the book itself into a television-like, non-linear experience. He was practicing what he preached about form.
And we absolutely can't talk about his celebrity status without mentioning his cameo in Annie Hall.
The ultimate academic mic drop. One of the greatest scenes in movie history.
For anyone who hasn't seen it, Woody Allen is standing in a movie line, and this unbelievably pompous academic guy behind him is lecturing his date about McLuhan's theories. And he's getting it all wrong.
Just babbling, pretentious nonsense. He doesn't get it. The medium is the message, but the message is really the medium. Just total garbage.
And Woody Allen gets more and more frustrated, and finally he turns to the camera and says, "If only life were like this." And he walks over to a movie poster and pulls the real Marshall McLuhan out from behind it.
The man himself.
And McLuhan looks the pompous guy dead in the eye and says,
I heard what you were saying. You know nothing of my work. You mean my whole fallacy is wrong? How you got to teach a course in anything is totally amazing.
"It is the most brutal, satisfying burn."
It's the fantasy of every nerd who's ever been stuck listening to a loudmouth in public, to have the actual expert appear out of thin air and just destroy them.
Sadly, though, we can't just summon Marshall McLuhan today to explain TikTok or AI to us.
We can't. But he did leave us a tool, a specific practical tool to do it ourselves. He called it the tetrad.
The tetrad. This sounds like a powerful artifact from a sci-fi movie.
It kind of is. It's from his last book, Laws of Media, which was published after he died. He and his son Eric claim that every human artifact, from a word to a car to a computer, follows 4 consistent laws. If you want to understand what our technology is really doing to you and your culture, you have to ask these 4 questions.
Okay, let's do this. I want to use the tetrad on something happening right now. Let's do generative AI. That's something like ChatGPT.
Well, that is a juicy one. Perfect. Okay. The 4 questions of the tetrad are, what does it enhance? What does it obsolesce? What does it retrieve? And what does it reverse into when pushed to its limit?
Okay, question 1, enhancement. What does AI enhance or amplify?
Well, the obvious one is it enhances the speed of text and image production. It amplifies the average consensus of information found on the internet. It enhances our ability to simulate reasoning.
It enhances the first draft. I never have to stare at a blank page again. It gets me started.
Correct. It amplifies the retrieval of data. Okay, good. Question 2, obsolescence. What does it push aside? What becomes junk because of AI?
The high school essay? It's laughs. Maybe the traditional school essay, yes. But also, maybe things like rote memorization. Or the job of the junior copywriter. The need to learn basic grammar, perhaps.
It obsolesces the struggle of writing. You know, that painful part where you have to sit and figure out what you actually think about something.
Yes. And McLuhan would immediately ask, if we obsolesce the struggle, do we also obsolesce the thinking that comes from that struggle?
Oof, that's a good question. Okay, next, retrieval. What does it bring back from the past that we thought we'd lost? This is always the tricky one.
Retrieval usually brings back something from the deep, often pre-literate past. With AI, I think it retrieves the oracle.
The oracle, like the oracle at Delphi.
Think about it. You go to a mysterious, non-human entity. You ask it a question in plain language. It gives you an answer that sounds profound, authoritative, but might be a complete hallucination. It's a bit magical. It retrieves the mythic voice from the machine.
That's so true. It feels like talking to a spirit sometimes. It's not like Googling. It's like asking a question. Or it retrieves orality again. You're having a conversation, a chat, instead of performing a search query.
Okay, I like that. Final one, reversal. What does it flip into when it's pushed to its extreme?
So when any technology overheats, it flips into its opposite. The automobile is supposed to speed up travel and create freedom. When there are too many cars, it creates gridlock, which stops travel and traps you.
Right. So if AI is pushed to the limit, what happens?
If AI produces all the new content, and then the next version of AI is trained on that synthetic content, it might flip into absurdity or madness.
Model collapse, where it just starts feeding on its own tail and speaking gibberish.
Exactly. Or it flips from being a tool for information into a tool for pure noise, a total loss of meaning. You can't tell what's real from what's fake, so nothing is real. It reverses into the opposite of knowledge.
That is a dark thought, but that's the tool, right? You can apply those 4 questions to anything.
Try it with your toaster. Try it with Zoom. Try it with a fork. It works every time. It's an amazing thinking tool.
I want to touch on one more concept from his later work before we wrap up, because it really connects to this madness or noise idea, the idea he had of robotism or androidism.
Right. This is from his later work with Bruce Powers in a book called The Global Village. He was looking at how Eastern and Western modes of thinking were colliding in the electric age.
And he had this core idea of visual space versus acoustic space.
Right. We talked about visual space being the Western world. It's linear, sequential, rational, the world created by the printed page. But acoustic space is different. It's the world of oral cultures, and now the electric world.
He had that great description, the center is everywhere and the margin is nowhere.
Which is a perfect description of the internet, isn't it? There's
yeah.
no center of the internet. It's a sphere of information coming from all directions at once. And McLuhan thought that to survive in this new acoustic electric world, we would have to become more like robots or androids.
That sounds like an insult, like we're becoming unfeeling machines.
He didn't mean it negatively. He wasn't talking about metal robots. He meant we would need the flexibility to be in many places at once, to have no fixed identity, to adjust instantly to the constant flow of feedback.
So, like a shapeshifter.
Exactly. The old fixed point of view, the solid, principled individual who stands on a rock and says, I am this and I believe this, he gets crushed by the waves in the global village. The survivor is the one who can surf the waves of information, the one who can swing from one identity to another.
But isn't that exhausting, being a shapeshifter all the time?
Yes. Which brings us right back to his quote about terror being the normal state. It's a high-stress, high-anxiety way to live.
It sounds like we're all just reacting all the time to everything, which would certainly explain why everyone seems so burned out.
And why McLuhan is more relevant now than he ever was in the 60s. He diagnosed the digital burnout 50 years before it happened.
So is he always right? I feel like we're painting him as this flawless prophet, but surely he missed some things or got things wrong.
Oh, absolutely. He had plenty of critics, and many of them had very valid points.
Who are the big ones who came after him?
The cultural critic Raymond Williams was a big one. He accused McLuhan of technological determinism.
Which means?
It means McLuhan talks as if technology just happens to us, like the weather. Like it just falls out of the sky and changes us. Williams' point was, hey, hold on. Humans invent these machines. Corporations build them to make money. Politicians regulate them. There are human choices and power structures involved.
Right. The Facebook algorithm didn't just evolve in nature. A specific engineer at Meta wrote it with the specific goal of maximizing engagement to sell more ads.
Exactly. Critics like Williams felt McLuhan ignored the politics and the economics. He was so focused on the abstract medium that he ignored the man behind the curtain pulling the levers.
That feels like a very fair critique. If we just say the medium is the message, it feels like we're helpless, like, oh, the phone made me do it. It absolves us of responsibility.
Precisely. Also, the great writer and semiotician Umberto Eco, the guy who wrote The Name of the Rose, he got very annoyed with McLuhan's sloppy terminology. McLuhan would use words like medium and channel and code and message almost interchangeably. For a rigorous academic, McLuhan was a complete headache.
He was a jazz musician improvising in a room full of classical conductors.
That is the perfect metaphor. He was riffing. He called his own ideas probes. He once said, "I don't explain, I explore."
I don't explain, I explore. I like that. It's a good excuse when you're wrong. Hey, I was just probing.
It served him well. But yeah, he fell out of fashion in the late 70s and 80s. People got tired of the guru act.
But then the internet happened and he came roaring back.
Roaring back. In the early 90s, Wired magazine basically adopted him as their patron saint and put him on their masthead. Because suddenly, we moved from the optic age of television, which was all about watching, to the haptic age of the internet.
Haptic, meaning touch.
The internet is tactile. We click, we drag, we swipe, we type. We are physically touching and manipulating the information. It's interactive. It's not just watching, it's doing. And McLuhan had predicted that the electric age would retrieve the sense of touch that the visual culture of print had suppressed. And there it was.
It's so weird to think of a cold glass screen as tactile, but I guess my thumb knows more about the world than my eyes do these days.
That is a very, very McLuhan-esque thought.
I try. Okay, one last concept to leave our listeners with. This might be my favorite one, the rearview mirror.
We march backward into the future.
I asked you about this before we started recording, and I still struggle to wrap my head around it. Why are we looking in the rearview mirror?
Because the future is terrifying and unknown. The new environment is, by its nature, invisible to us at first. So when we get a new technology in a new environment, we don't look at it for what it is. We look at it through the lens of the thing that came right before it.
Can you give me an example?
When the car was invented, what do we call it?
A horseless carriage.
Exactly. We defined it by what it wasn't. We slapped an engine on a buggy and thought of it as just a faster carriage. We didn't understand that the car was not a carriage at all. We didn't see that it would create suburbs, highways, the oil industry, and climate change. We just saw a faster horse. We were looking at the future through a 19th century lens.
When the first movies came out, they were just filmed stage plays.
Right. They put a stationary camera in front of a stage and recorded the action. They didn't understand the cut, the zoom, the montage, the unique language of film until much, much later. They were treating the new medium like the old one.
So what are we doing now? What's our rearview mirror for the internet?
We still treat the internet like a big library or a post office. We talk about web pages. We talk about sending mail. We try to apply copyright laws that were meant for physical newspapers to a fluid medium like Facebook. We were driving 100 miles an hour into a completely new digital future. But our eyes are glued to the rearview mirror, looking at the familiar industrial past because it feels safe.
That explains the constant feeling of disorientation. We're trying to navigate a spaceship using a map that was drawn for a steam train.
And Marshall McLuhan is the guy in the passenger seat, gently, or maybe not so gently, tapping on the glass and saying, "Put down the map, look out the windshield," even if what you see out there is terrifying.
Wow! Marshall McLuhan, the man who saw the windshield when everyone else was staring in the mirror.
A poet of technology, a mechanic of the mind.
You know, for a guy who died in 1980, before the personal computer really even took off, he seems to understand my daily life better than I do.
That's the mark of a true visionary. He didn't just see the machines. He understood the grammar of the machine, the hidden effects.
So here is my final thought for you, the person listening to this, and I want to make this a little uncomfortable. McLuhan said, the content is the juicy steak that distracts the watchdog of the mind. You've been listening to us talk for the last hour. That's the steak.
Well, what about the medium?
Right. What about the device in your hand or in your pocket or the smart speaker in your room right now? What is it doing to your body as you listen? Are you hunched over a phone? Are you walking through traffic with earbuds in, not looking where you're going? Are you ignoring a real human being in the room with you to listen to two disembodied digital voices?
How has that specific device rewired your sensorium today?
Don't just answer the question intellectually. Feel it in your body. And maybe just for a second after this ends, put the device down and look out the windshield. Thanks for diving up with us.
See you in the global village.
Welcome to the debate. Today, we are dissecting the mind of a man who really predicted the architecture of our digital lives before most people even owned a color television. He was a Canadian English professor who somehow became the patron saint of Wired magazine, a figure who appeared on the cover of Newsweek, in the pages of Playboy, and even silenced a pompous academic in that famous cameo for Woody Allen's Annie Hall. I am talking, of course, about Herbert Marshall McLuhan.
A man who was equal parts, high priest of pop and, if you believe his harsher critics, a peddler of magical naivety. We're looking at a legacy built on these slogans that sound incredibly profound at 2 in the morning, but often fall apart in the harsh light of day.
And that is the friction we need to explore. McLuhan is the father of media studies. The source material highlights that he predicted the World Wide Web 30 years early, describing a private line to speedily tailored data. But the core question isn't just about his predictions. It's about his central thesis: the medium is the message. Did McLuhan unlock the secret code of human consciousness, or did he just give us catchy poetry? I'm here to argue he was a visionary, a pattern recognizer who understood that the form of our communication changes us fundamentally, regardless of what we say through it.
And I'm here to argue that this very view, the medium is the message, is a dangerous trap. It's what critics like Raymond Williams called technological determinism. By obsessing over the machinery, McLuhan ignores the social context, the political decisions, and crucially, the actual content of what we consume. He treats technology like a weather system we just have to endure, rather than a tool we can actually control.
Okay, well, let's get right into the machinery then. To understand McLuhan, you have to start with his 1964 work, Understanding Media, The Extensions of Man. His premise is radical, but I think essential. Media are not just passive pipes for information. They are extensions of our biological senses. A wheel extends the foot. A book extends the eye. And electronic media, the telegraph, the radio, the internet, extend our central nervous system.
Extensions of the central nervous system. It sounds impressive, but let's just strip away the jargon for a second. What does that actually mean?
It means that when you use a technology, you are physically and psychologically altering your relationship with the world. We tend to focus on the content, the specific words in a book or the show on TV. McLuhan argued that the content is a distraction. He called it the juicy piece of meat carried by the burglar to distract the watchdog of the mind. While you are arguing about the plot of the TV show, the medium of television is rewiring how your brain processes information.
But that's where the logic just feels slippery to me. If you ignore content, you lose the ability to critique reality. But okay, let's look at his favorite proof of concept, the light bulb.
The light bulb is the perfect example because it is a medium without any content. It doesn't speak, it doesn't show you pictures, but does it have a message? Absolutely. The message of the light bulb is that it allows human activity to extend into the night. It restructures how we associate, how we work, and how we organize society. A brain surgery or a baseball game happening at night, that is the message of the light, not the surgery or the game itself. The medium changes the scale and pace of human affairs.
I will grant you that the light bulb changes the environment, of course. But when McLuhan expands the definition of medium to include light bulbs and roads and wheels and the alphabet, the term becomes so broad it's almost useless. This was Umberto Eco's main critique. He argued that McLuhan conflates channels, codes, and messages all under one umbrella. I mean, if a light bulb is a medium and a novel is a medium, how can we possibly analyze them with the same tools? You're mixing infrastructure with communication.
You analyze them by looking at their structural impact on the sensorium, not their semiotics. The light bulb changes how we see the world just as much as a book changes how we think about the world.
But you can't separate the structure from the usage. Understanding media contains a claim that I find genuinely baffling. McLuhan asserts that the social effect of television is identical whether it's broadcasting children's educational shows or violent programming. He actually wrote, and I quote, "Even witlessness is not a moral issue."
He didn't mean morality doesn't exist. He meant it's irrelevant to the structural change the medium is causing.
But that is a massive abdication of responsibility. If we accept that the machine does the work, regardless of what we put on it, we absolve ourselves of any choice. It implies that if you put a fascist on the radio or a saint on the radio, the societal impact is the same because radio is doing the work. That is the definition of technological determinism. It strips us of human agency.
I disagree. I think McLuhan argues that agency is impossible without awareness. He famously said we look at the present through a rearview mirror. We march backward into the future, obsessing over the content of the past, while the new medium works us over. Early movies were just plays filmed on a stage. Early TV was just radio with pictures. We don't see the new medium's true nature until it's too late. He wasn't telling us to give up. He was telling us to look at the windshield so we don't crash.
The rearview mirror is a nice metaphor, but let's apply this to history. McLuhan didn't just analyze the present, he tried to rewrite the past using this whole media ecology idea, specifically in the Gutenberg galaxy.
Published in 1962, and frankly his most compelling historical argument, McLuhan traced how the invention of the printing press, specifically movable type, created what he called typographic man. Experience was communal and auditory. You heard the news from the town crier. You heard scripture in church. You didn't possess it. But print is visual, linear, and solitary. You read alone. It fostered the habit of a fixed point of view. McLuhan argued that this shift to visual dominance created the conditions for individualism, for nationalism, and even for the assembly line. The visual homogenizing of experience allowed us to see ourselves as separate units.
And as a historian, this is where I really have to pull the brake. To attribute the rise of democracy, Protestantism, capitalism, and the nation-state solely to the technology of movable type is a gross oversimplification. It completely ignores class struggle, economics, theology. It's like the great man theory of history replaced with the great machine theory. You can't just say, Gutenberg invented the press, therefore we got the Reformation.
He isn't saying economics didn't happen. He's saying the environment that made those economic structures possible was typographic. You cannot have a nation-state without a standardized print language to bind it. You can't have a scientific method without the ability to exactly reproduce diagrams and text for peer review. The medium laid the groundwork for the culture, but the crucial part is what happens next. He argued that the electronic age, radio, TV, and now the internet, is reversing that whole process. We are being retribalized.
The global village. Perhaps the most misunderstood term in his entire canon, without a doubt.
People hear global village and they think of some Coca-Cola commercial, everyone holding hands in harmony. But McLuhan was very clear. He said, terror is the normal state of any oral society. In the global village, we move from visual space, which is logical and compartmentalized, to acoustic space.
Okay, explain acoustic space for the listeners, because this gets into his neurology theories, which are, to put it mildly, contentious.
Right. Visual space is like looking at a painting. It's static, linear, it has a perspective. It belongs to the typographic man. Acoustic space is like being in a dark room with surround sound. Information comes from everywhere at once, simultaneously. You are the center of the sphere. In an electronic environment, think about Twitter or a 24-hour news cycle, we aren't detached observers anymore. We lose our private identity and merge into a corporate, tribal identity. We become totally interdependent.
Which sounds terrifying.
It is terrifying. He explicitly warned of panic terrors. When everyone is involved in everyone else's business instantly, you don't get peace, you get friction. You get a loss of privacy. He predicted that the loss of the private individual would lead to violence as people scrambled to find a new group identity.
I appreciate you highlighting the terror aspect, because the utopian interpretation is so persistent. However, the science behind this, the visual left brain versus the acoustic right brain, is incredibly shaky. By the time he wrote The Global Village in 1989, he was relying on a binary view of neurology that modern neuroscience doesn't really support. And does the internet actually create a tribe? I see fragmentation. I see echo chambers. I don't see a unified village. I see a billion fractured realities.
Well, McLuhan would argue the echo chamber is the tribe. The retribalization implies a return to emotion and group identity over logical, detached debate. The internet creates micro-tribes that are constantly at war. That is exactly what an acoustic, oral society looks like. Rumor, emotion, and reaction, rather than the cool detachment of reading a book.
Well, speaking of cool and hot, we have to tackle his categorization system. This is the part that usually trips people up. And honestly, the part that makes me question his rigor the most.
It's counterintuitive, I'll grant you, but it's consistent if you follow the logic. In understanding media, he classifies media based on the degree of participation required by the user.
A hot medium is high definition. It provides a massive amount of data to a single sense. A photograph is hot. The radio is hot. It spoon feeds you the information so you don't have to work to complete the picture.
And cool media? Cool media are low definition. They give you very little data, which forces the audience to participate, to fill in the gaps. The telephone is cool because the audio quality is poor. Your brain has to work to visualize the person. Cartoons are cool. And crucially for the 1960s, television was cool. And this is where it just breaks down for me. He claims a movie is hot because it's high res, but TV is cool because the 1960s image was a fuzzy mosaic of dots. I mean, to the average person, watching a film and watching TV are almost identical passive acts. Yet McLuhan insists that because TV is cool, it requires deep participation and involvement, whereas radio is hot and detached. It just feels arbitrary.
He argued that any hot medium allows of less participation than a cool one. Think about a lecture versus a seminar. A lecture is hot, information is blasted at you. A seminar is cool, you have to engage to make it work. He believed the TV generation was fundamentally different from the radio generation because their brains were trained to complete the mosaic. The physical act of watching the scanning lines of a CRT TV engaged the nervous system in a way film didn't.
But these labels, hot and cool, they don't hold up to scrutiny. Regis Debray called McLuhan a master of intellectual collage for this exact reason. He just pasted labels where he wanted them. For example, is a high-definition podcast today hot, while a scratchy vinyl record is cool? What about a 4K television? Is that now hot because the resolution is high? If the classification changes with the technical specs, it's not a law of media, it's just a tech review.
I think you're getting hung up on the technical specs rather than the cognitive load. The insight is that we engage differently based on the fidelity of the signal. But I admit McLuhan didn't write for the classifiers. He explicitly stated he didn't want to explain, he wanted to explore. He called his works probes.
Probes is such a convenient excuse for a lack of rigor. It allows him to throw out 100 ideas, have 90 be nonsense, and then claim victory on the 10 that actually land.
That the ones that landed changed the world. And his methodology wasn't just throwing darts. Look at the medium as the massage.
A title that came from a typo.
A serendipitous typo. Yes, the typesetter wrote massage instead of message, and McLuhan kept it. He saw message, mess-age, massage, and mass-age. That book, designed with Quentin Fiore, was a masterpiece of graphic design. It wasn't a linear argument, it was a visual experience. He was trying to replicate the chaos of the electronic age in a book. He was showing us that the book itself, the medium of the book, was changing.
It was certainly a successful art project, but we have to address the Fordham experiment. His son, Eric McLuhan, tried to scientifically prove these theories, testing light-on versus light-through media to see if they stimulated different parts of the brain. Did it actually yield empirical results? Not really. It was inconclusive. Dwight MacDonald, a fierce critic, noted that McLuhan's books were full of facts that are distorted and facts that are not facts.
McLuhan wasn't an empiricist. He was a pattern recognizer. He wasn't trying to give you a double-blind study. He was trying to give you a lens. And frankly, late in his life, he did formalize his thinking into something structured, the tetrad of media effects.
I will grant that the tetrad is the most rigorous tool he produced. It's certainly more useful than the whole hot-cool dichotomy.
It's a tool that lets you strip away the judgment of good or bad and just look at impact. He argued you can ask 4 questions of any technology, a car, a smartphone, AI. First, what does it enhance? Second, what does it obsolete or push aside? Third, what does it retrieve that was previously lost? And fourth, what does it reverse into when pushed to its extreme?
Walk us through an example. How would he apply this today?
Okay, let's take the smartphone. It enhances accessibility and communication speed. You are always connected. The world is in your pocket. It obsoletes distance, the landline, the wristwatch, and to some extent memory. You don't need to remember phone numbers or facts anymore. It retrieves the scroll. We are back to scrolling like ancients reading papyrus, and we retrieved pictorial communication of the preprint era via emojis and Instagram. And finally, what does it reverse into? When pushed to the extreme, the tool of ultimate connection reverses into a tool of isolation and anxiety, the digital leash. We are so connected we become lonely.
That is a compelling analysis. It's elegant, But my issue remains. The tetrad treats the technology as this evolving organism with its own will. The smartphone reverses into isolation. No. Designers built algorithms to keep us addicted. Corporations decided to harvest our data. By focusing on these inevitable structural changes, enhancement, reversal, we lose sight of the who. Who is building the machine? Who is profiting from the obsolescence?
I would argue that unless we use the tetrad to understand the nature of the organism, we are powerless against the creators. You can't regulate what you don't understand. If you think the smartphone is just a phone, you've already lost the battle. The designers themselves often don't realize the reversal effects until they happen. The creators of Twitter didn't set out to create political polarization. That was an effect of the medium itself.
And I would argue that understanding the grammar of the medium is useless if we ignore the political economy behind it. We aren't just fighting a medium, we are fighting a market. This is why McLuhan's friendship with advertising executives like Howard Gossage is problematic. He was too comfortable with the people manipulating the message. He consulted for IBM, he consulted for AT&T, he was criticizing the water while taking checks from the sharks.
He was engaging with the powers that be because they were the ones shaping the environment. He famously said art is a distant, early warning system. He viewed his work as art, as a way to wake people up.
A fair point, but we have to acknowledge the limitations.
We are nearing the end of our time, and we should probably try to land this plane.
I'll stand by my assessment. Marshall McLuhan was a fascinating cultural figure. He was the patron saint of the digital age for a reason. But his theories, I think, suffer from that magical naivete described by Debray. By insisting that the medium is the message, he leaves us with a toolkit that is fantastic for describing the vibe of an era, but terrible for critiquing the actual power structures. He was a poet, perhaps even a mystic, given his private Catholicism, but he was not a scientist of communication.
And I will maintain that his lack of scientific rigidity was his greatest strength. He saw what others missed because he wasn't looking at the data, he was looking at the environment. He predicted the internet would retrieve the individual's encyclopedic function. He warned us about the panic terrors of a totally interdependent world. Whether his definitions of hot and cool were perfect is, at the end of the day, irrelevant compared to the magnitude of his central insight, that we are fish swimming in water, unaware of the water itself. McLuhan forced us to look at the water.
He certainly made us look, though I suspect we are still arguing about what exactly we are seeing in the reflection.
Perhaps that ambiguity is fitting for the man who said, "I don't explain, I explore." Whether you view him as a prophet or a determinist, Marshall McLuhan provided the vocabulary we still use to attempt to understand our digital lives.
On that, at least we can agree.
Thank you for joining us on The Debate.
Thank you.